Hello, and welcome to IT Voice. I want to share with you what we're all about. And so we're going to talk about some stories and some concepts that will hopefully be helpful to you to learn who IT Voice is. So let's start at the top in terms of who we are. So I've got that picture of the car that I love to share. And the analogy is that we want to take the company as far, as fast as we can go. We want to make money. We're not shy about it. Everybody knows that businesses exist to make money. So we're not going to brush it under the rug. Y'all all know that already. But there's a way about how we're going to do that. And we're not going to go outside the lines. You know, if it's double yellow, we're not going to cross it. We're going to wait till the right opportunity. We're not going to run over pedestrians. We're going to follow our moral and ethical standards for how we operate the company. And so we're trying to find that balance between going fast and going far and doing it the right way. So when you look at that car, you'll see our 4 core values shown there. So you'll see focus on others, work smart, do the right thing, and own it. So let me explain a little bit about what that means. So we start by focusing on others. We're looking out, in the literal sense of the analogy. We're making sure that we're not running over anybody. We're focusing on others and we're looking at, hey, where are we headed? And is that serving our customers? Is that serving our employees? Is that serving our community in the way we want to be served? And so we're looking at others and making sure we're doing things in a way that makes sense, in a way that's good for all. We want to always find that win-win-win between all of the parties that are involved. So then we move to own it. And I move to own it because that's the engine. That's the drive. That's the employees that are working with the company that are making it happen each and every day. If people don't show up and people don't work hard, nothing's going to happen. So we have to start there. And so that's each and every one of you that comes in and you've got your own motivation. You've got the work ethic that you've brought and you're making it happen. And so that's the own it that propels us forward. But then we got the work smart, which is the transmission. And so sometimes you have people who can work really hard, but maybe not as smart. You're not going to go as fast, not going to go as far. So we want to make sure that we're getting the maximum out of our effort. We always want to be finding ways to do more with less. And so that's where we apply that work smart and the transmission, if you will, to the analogy. And then finally, we stop at do the right thing. And that's the brakes. Because sometimes you got to slow down. You got to pump the brakes. But we got to make a change of direction to make sure that we don't run over somebody, make sure that we don't go outside the lines. And so we want to always make sure that we're doing the right thing. And that's the last of the core values. So now I'm going to go through some stories. I love sharing stories. I think it helps people explain who we are about. So I say that the core values, they're like a quick start guide. If you've ever gotten, some new electronic, that comes with a quick start guide that tells you how to get going. The pledges are like the owner's manual, and they give a whole lot more detail about what does it mean to actually exercise those core values. And so I'm going to go over all 25 pledges that we have, and I'm going to tell a handful of stories to help demonstrate and share with you what those mean to us. So we're going to start here with the third egg story. It's the most interesting. I get the most questions about it. We say, I am the third egg, and people always say, well, Will, what does that mean? And so I'll tell you the story of where it came from. You've got a guy that was traveling, and he was in New England on business. And the morning he was leaving, he decided to grab breakfast before he headed out. And so he came to the main street there in a small town, and he noticed 2 diners, a diner on each side of the street. One diner had a lot more cars than the other diner did. So he figured, hey, if the locals like it, it's probably the better place. So that's where he went. He got his usual breakfast. And in the back of his mind, he couldn't put his finger on what was the difference. Why was this one so much more popular? So when his waiter came by, he asked, he said, hey, I noticed that everybody seems to be here, not the other place. Can you tell me the difference? The waiter kind of looked in and he said, you're not from around here, are you, sir? And he said, no, sir, I'm not. I'm from about 1,000 miles away. So he said, well, I'll tell you, but you can't tell anybody. So the guy says, Scout's honor. So the waiter turned out to be the owner, and he began to share with him what made the difference. And what he said was, when people come into my diner and they order eggs like you did, they expect to get 2. That's the standard ordered across the United States. But what I discovered was, an egg only costs me a nickel, and I can throw a third one in for not a whole lot more money and give the customer a better experience. I call it the third egg. That's what we want to do. The third egg is about setting those clear expectations and then exceeding them. Sometimes we get really corny and say we want to exceed customers' expectations. When we talk about the book Raving Fans that you'll hear us mention many times, it gives exactly that formula. How do you make a raving fan? Well, you set clear expectations and then you exceed it by 1%. And that's really what the third egg is all about. We got customers. We want to do something that goes above and beyond. Obviously, we got to set clear expectations. Obviously, we have to meet those expectations. And then the third egg is going just a little bit beyond that now creates that great customer experience that we want to have. So we start with the third egg story and we kind of build from there. Now, the third egg story kind of alludes to having great customer experiences. And obviously, that's what we're all about. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that every customer experience we ever had was always the most positive. So I'm going to give you two stories of some not quite so positive experiences from customers. The first is they were customers of ours for a long time when this happened. So we had dropped the ball on some things and not made the customer happy. And frankly, they wanted to leave us. They told us that. They said, when is our contract up? Can we get out of our contract? Things were bad. Thankfully, we had some time left on the contract. And we dove in head first with that customer. And there were two pledges that I'll emphasize here. First is confront the brutal facts, yet never lose faith. And so what we did was we didn't ignore the situation. We didn't blame the customer and say, oh, well, they just don't know what's going on. We didn't just kind of put our heads in the sand and say, hey, things are going to get better. So we confronted the brutal facts and said, okay, what are the real problems? And listening to the customer and doing our own, investigation to figure out how did we drop the ball? Where did we fall short? So we dove into what the brutal facts were. But also we didn't go on the other side. Sometimes as you get into the brutal facts, the natural human tendency is to get depressed and feel like, we can't get out of this. We can't make this better. The customer doesn't like us, like to lose faith in the process. And so that's the other part of that pledge. Confront the brutal facts, yet never lose faith. Always believe that if you put enough effort in, you ultimately will fulfill. Will not fail, but ultimately will get to where you want to with that customer. And so we went down that path with the customer. And interestingly enough, as we solved the issues that were there, we went one step further to another pledge. We became our customer's trusted advisor. We learned why were those issues that they were having so impactful to their business and was able to even add improvements beyond just simply fixing the problems. Now, this is a great story because about 6 months later, this customer gave us a referral. We had gone from, we want to quit doing business with you to, hey, we're going to use our good name to tell somebody else they should do business with you. But that would have never happened if we had not confronted the brutal facts, if we had lost faith, or if we hadn't gone above and beyond to become the customer's trusted advisor. So it's a great story. The next story is a customer of mine, and that actually is a friend of mine. And I got a call one day, and he said, hey, Will, I hate to bother you. And he's a nice Southern guy. But I could tell that he was a little bit upset. He's like, hey, we had somebody start today. We put in a ticket 10 days ago, and I forget the details, but they needed a new account set up and our name changed on a couple of things and get that employee ready to go. So it wasn't overly complicated request. And so he said, hey, Will, we put it in 10 days ago. And I know sometimes it takes a second to get something done, but we really need this done. Can you help us out? Of course, we got it knocked out, got the customer happy. Thankfully, we had a great relationship. So, it didn't amount to much, but it bothered me. I said, why is it taking us 10 days? Obviously that's, unacceptable. We should never take that long, for a customer request. So we dug into it. So a couple of pledges that I would mention here. First is conduct autopsies without blame. So the goal, as I was diving into this, investigating it, was not to try to figure out who dropped the ball and throw them under the bus. That's not how we operate as a company. We wanted to figure out, okay, was it a system? Was there a mishandling? What was the issue? So we can get it fixed and it not happen again. So we conducted the autopsies without blame. So then we could confront the brutal facts. So that was the first one. Ultimately, what we found was that we didn't validate with the customer. So when I went through the details, the customer had called in about, noon that day. And within 1 hour, 1 o'clock, we had solved, or at least we thought that we had solved the customer's issue. So the ticket that they had put in was worked. It was assigned to somebody, it got worked, and it was done, and it got closed. And so we thought that the problem was resolved. I never really got to exactly what happened, but at the end of the day, there was some sort of miscommunication on our end, and we didn't get what the customer thought they had asked us to be done. And so now we on one hand think we've done it, but for the customer, what they wanted hadn't actually happened. If we had used validation and somebody had picked up the phone and called the customer or sent them a message or any other form of communication, we would have said, hey, it's done. Then the customer would have said, oh, no, actually it's not. And we would have gotten it instantly resolved. So we took what should have been a great experience of less than an hour to resolution on an issue, and now it became a 10-day response. So that's why validation is important. We got to make sure that what we think happened is actually what happened. And that can happen both with customers as well as with each other, that we want to make sure that everybody, is on the same page. So while we're on the subject, though, of customers' expectation that we've talked a lot about, I'm going to share with you one of my favorite stories about the FedEx wall. So back in the 90s, FedEx identified through customer surveys that customers were not nearly as satisfied as they expected them to be. Now, they had looked at all the statistics, and they were the best in the world when it came to having packages to the right place at the right time. 99.99% of the time, they got it right. But the customer surveys were telling a much different story, and there was a lot of customers who felt uncertain or uneasy and didn't have the confidence in FedEx that they would have expected to match the actual statistics, the reality of what was happening. So the first thing that FedEx did was that they were proactive. And so that's the first place that I want to talk about is they were proactive. First, they had the customer surveys that they were making sure, validating that what they were doing was actually, what they thought they were doing was really happening. And then secondly, when they realized that there was a disconnect, they proactively investigated it to figure out how they could solve the problem. So they hired a firm to look into it. And what the firm found was that whenever a customer would come into a FedEx location, they bring their package and, give it to the person across the counter. The person would take it and they'd put it on this, literal leaning tower of packages. If you've ever, been to somewhere and seen this, you kind of have that uneasy feeling like, is that super important package to me going to be taken care of? Because it doesn't look like it with the care that it appears to have right now. And so they had identified what the issue was. Now the solution was very simple. They built what later became known as the FedEx wall. So then when customers came in to those locations, behind the counter, there was a wall. So the same thing would happen. Customer give their package, the employee take the package, but now they went behind the wall. What was behind the wall? The same leaning tower of packages. The only difference was, from the customer's perspective, it went into this magical land of logistics behind the wall, and it was going to get where it was supposed to be at the right time and at the right place. And so they solved the problem, and they saw the customer surveys, those statistics come up to match the reality of what was happening. Sometimes when it comes to communication, and this story is a lot about being fanatic about great communication. Sometimes we think more information is better. Oh, I want to tell the truth. I want to tell the customer everything. Sometimes that can create uncertainty that's not even there. And so we have to be thoughtful about what we communicate to a customer how much we communicate to a customer, when we communicate to a customer, to make sure the message that we want, to make sure that the reality the customer has matches what's really going on. Many people say you never, want to go into the kitchen of your favorite restaurant because when you see how things really come together, it might not seem so appetizing. And so it's important for us in our communication, we consider what we say, what we do, how we do it. All of that is building the customer's expectations, and we want those to be great. So we got to have great communication. Another great example of being proactive is changing your oil. So I'm sure you all have some sort of schedule or one of those stickers or whatnot that you change your oil on a regular basis. And that's a great example of being proactive. But there's a couple other things that I want to highlight as a part of the pledges that you could tie into that story or that analogy. So first off is acting with integrity. Whenever you change your oil, unless you're, really, really talented, you're probably not doing that while you are riding down the highway. You've got a plan for it. It's an inconvenience. You're not necessarily getting to be productive and getting stuff done, right? You're having to take some time out. And so I analogize that to acting with integrity. A lot of times when we act with integrity, there's a cost. It slows us down. Again, kind of going back to the brakes. Sometimes you got to pump the brakes, and that slows us down a little bit in order to get it done. So, but if you don't get it done, there's going to be some long-term consequences. So acting with integrity, while there may be a short-term cost, it always turns out better for all of us when we do that. So that's one pledge to consider. The next pledge would be work on myself. So it's so easy in our day-to-day basis to get caught up in what we need to get done. And we're always working, we're serving customers, and we're knocking things out. But sometimes we need to stop. We need to pull over, and we need to take a break. That may mean, hey, you need to get some training to get yourself improved in terms of the value that you can bring. It may be that you need to take a vacation. You need to take some R&R. You need to lay low for a while. It doesn't do anybody good for an employee to get burned out from working too hard. And again, kind of back to the acting with integrity, that short-term gain that we get by an employee working too hard, if they burn out, is going to have a long-term, effect. It's not worth skipping an oil change and then now having your engine locked up. That's a much more expensive problem than what it costs to change your oil. So we want to pause and make sure that we're working on ourselves. Now, the last pledge that I'll emphasize here is ask for help. So when I grew up, my father taught me all sorts of things. He grew up on a farm himself, and so he knew how to do everything, and he taught that to all of the kids. And so I grew up changing my own oil. Now, while I didn't necessarily completely suck at it, it wasn't something I was great at. I would spill some oil, trying to get the right filter, all that stuff. You certainly wouldn't want me to change the oil in your car. And so I reached a certain point that it kind of dawned on me. I was like, there are other people that can do this a lot better than I can. And so I get them to do it for me now, and it's a lot better. It's a better job done. And it takes something off of my plate. And that's one thing that I would mention about asking for help. Sometimes when people think about asking for help, they only think of, I need the help because I can't do it. And that's not the case with how we look at it. Sometimes you do need help because you don't know the answer and you can't do it. A lot of times we ask for help is as much for the other person as it is for us. They need to learn how to do it. Perhaps they're better at it, or with practice, they'll get better at it because they have more time and energy to focus on it. So when we ask for help, it's important for the organization. It's important that it allows you to grow, and it's important that it allows your teammates around you to also grow. So think about changing your oil. Think about me asking for help, and let's all ask for help as well. Asking for help also will promote one team. And so one of our other pledges is support one team. Again, I'll tell you one of my favorite stories about Belgian draft horses. And this is just incredibly fascinating to me. So they have all these competitions, and they have I call them sleighs, or sleds that they'll attach to a Belgian draft horse, and, they'll see how much weight they can pull and how far. And so a single Belgian draft horse by themselves can pull 8,000 pounds. Now, the interesting thing is, when they put two of them together on a team with the little harness thing, they can go from pulling 8,000 pounds individually to pulling 24,000 pounds together. So 8 plus 8 is 16, so then another 8 is 24, so that's 3 times the amount of weight that they can pull with only twice the amount of, I don't know if you'd say horsepower, maybe I guess Belgian draft power, that they have there. And so that's what it looks like when we support one team. When we come together and we focus on going in the same direction, we can get a lot more done than when we're just acting individually. The other thing that I think is really important here is that support one team does not mean that we're all somehow homogeneous people who all agree about everything. It is very good and very healthy for us as an organization to disagree. That's why we have confront the brutal facts. So if you don't think something's right, you should speak up and say, hey, I'm not sure this is right. But at the end of the day, we're not all going to agree about everything, and we are one team, and so we have to choose a direction to go in. So when the direction is chosen, we all have to put aside that disagreement that we may have had and all support the team in the direction that we've chosen to go. So I think that's an important distinction to understand. One of the other pledges I would talk about with this story is being passionate. We want all of the team members to be in the right seat on the bus. And when you're in the right seat and you're loving what you're doing, that's where I think you really gain that synergy with your teammates to ultimately get the most done. Another pledge I would talk about in the same one would be do my best. You know, even if it's something you're passionate about, even if you're supporting the team, and this kind of gets back to, own it, which is one of our core values of really, hey, are you driving forward with what you're doing? And I think we want people to be in those right positions, and when they love what they're doing and when they're with the right team of people, that they really can accomplish that. So sometimes if you're feeling like you're not passionate, you're feeling like I can't do my best here, maybe we need to make some tweaks and changes to make sure that you really are being as productive and enjoying what you're doing, which I think is another very important part. That's one of our pledges, is to have fun. And I use having fun a lot of times as a litmus test. Litmus test is something that you can, check quickly to see if there's a problem or not. So if you find yourself not having fun, if you're dreading coming to work, then that's an indicator for you that something's out of whack. Maybe there's something we need to fix. Maybe you've changed as a person, but some conversations need to be had. Now, don't overdo that. You're not going to enjoy 100% of the time of everything you do in your job. It is work, and sometimes that's not perfectly enjoyable. But overall, we want to make sure that people are enjoying what they're doing and that they're having fun in the work they're doing and with the team that they're with. The next pledge that I would talk about as a part of the story is being consistent. So when you put one draft horse, they can pull 8,000. We talked about that. When you have two draft horses together, now it's 24,000 pounds. But when you have two draft horses who have worked together and they know each other, now it goes from 24,000 to 32,000 pounds. And so our pledge that talks about being consistent, I think, really comes into play. When we are consistently working together, when we create rhythms of how we do things, that consistency drives the relationships and it drives the productivity. So we want to find how we can do things in a methodical fashion, in a repeatable manner. And I think that helps us be a lot more effective and ultimately have a lot more fun in terms of what we're doing. So how do we practically accomplish this? I've talked a lot about, some of this is kind of theoretical, and it's like, that sounds great. So the next pledges begin to get a little bit more into some of the nuts and bolts in terms of how we do things. So the first one is I'll tell you a story, and I'm going to talk about TSP, which is one of the things that I've learned over the years that I think is really powerful. And I was talking to a manager, and we had an employee who we were discussing terminating. They weren't performing in their job the way that we needed them to perform. And so we had kind of worked through some different corrective actions, and we were talking about, okay, what are the next steps? And hey, hopefully they can improve, but we're not sure. So then a couple of days later, after that conversation, after we kind of set the plan, I saw come up on my agenda that I was to write their annual anniversary card. So that's something that I do. One of our pledges is invest in relationships. And so that's, I would love to spend time with all of our employees. As we get larger, sometimes that's not, logistically possible. So one of the things that I do is I want to make sure that I thank every single one of our employees at least once a year. And so as a part of how I do that is that I write a card to all of you on your anniversary, and just, thank you for what you do to serve the company and our customers. So I was sitting down and writing to write this card, and I was just like, okay, I don't want to be inauthentic. One of our pledges is, I will edify. So, I want to be encouraging and uplifting. And I'm like, but I want to act with integrity, another pledge. I have to be truthful. So I was really kind of stuck with like, what do I say? I was kind of tempted to not even write the card, but I was like, well, what if this employee takes a turn and then now I've missed their card? Like, so I was just kind of stuck. So I just kind of left it there and came back. And ultimately what dawned on me was a principle that I already shared with the company called TSP. Some people remember it with the little, think about like a teaspoon, and think about doing something in, small increments. And it stands for truthful, specific, and positive. Truthful and positive are the easy ones, right? Like if you're going to give somebody encouragement, you have to be truthful about it. And of course, the very nature of encouragement, it has to be positive. So we're not promoting brown nosing or just, general vague encouragements, right? We want to be truthful and positive. But I think that the real secret sauce to the recipe is the middle one, which is specific. Because what I was ultimately able to figure out was just because this employee had performance issues, there was still a lot of really good things about them. They were very, very caring to their fellow employee. And so I was able to write a card about that and about what they were doing as far as caring for the person next to them, and thank them and encouraging them in that without having to say things that were untruthful. One of the things I've found over the years is many times the person who is the hardest to encourage, the person whose performance may be the lowest, maybe the hardest person to love and care for, many times they're the person who needs the encouragement most. So TSP is a very valuable tool, so to speak, that you can use to help with that. Because giving just grand accolades doesn't really help somebody. Growing up, my grandmother, she always saw the best in me. She saw the things I was good at, and she grabbed a hold of those things. Sure, she maybe kind of on the fringes encouraged me as well to improve on those things, but I knew she believed in me, and I knew that she knew that I could be something great. And she grabbed onto those specific things that she saw in me and encouraged me in those. So that's how you can apply TSP. You can edify, recognize others. That's one of our pledges. And so that's where it really ties in, is find a way to recognize those people, especially those people maybe that don't look as good, but they really need that encourage. Invest in those relationships. And then finally, one of our pledges, put others first, because it really does take a lot of energy and effort. You have to stop what you're doing to now spend some time and energy to encourage someone else. And so you're having to put their interest ahead of your own in order to accomplish that. And so I think that's very important as a company that we do that and that we build those relationships. Another story along these lines is about me and my wife. Back when we were first married, we didn't have kids for a couple of years, but we had ideas about parenting. And I'm going to tie into our pledge here in just a second of embracing technology. And so, when before we had kids, we had some thoughts and ideas about, how we should parent. And if somebody, which they shouldn't have, but if somebody had asked, give us some parenting advice, we would have had some, right? We had thought through it and we had some ideas and some thoughts. But as everybody could identify, we wouldn't be the right people to ask that because we hadn't practically done that, and it was just thoughts. It wasn't really that helpful. And of course, after we had 3 kids, we found out that some of our ideas that we had, weren't that great. Some of them were, and some of them got a whole lot better. We also found that our first child was different from our second child, who was different from our third child, and so what we thought we found out on the first one, kind of changed. Just the other day, I was at lunch with a friend and I was picking his brain. He's got some older kids. I was like, okay, what happens when they get this age and trying to learn from somebody that's farther down the path. So what does all this mean? So for us at IT Voice, we want to embrace technology. And the reason why that's important is we can't just tell customers, hey, here's theoretically how it works. We can't just tell customers, hey, this is technically how it works. We need to be able to be that trusted advisor, that technology consultant for the customer. And the only way we can actually really do that is if we love and we use and we embrace the technology that we're advocating that they should use. Now, this is important for all of us, not just those who are customer facing. When it comes to a lot of the different tools that we use, many of them are collaborative, whether it be a messaging or document storage or any of the others that we use. If you're the only one using them, you can't really use them, right? You've got to be using them all together. So even those people in our company who maybe don't talk to customers a whole lot, your participation in the use of that technology helps us as a company use it. And then that way, those of us who are the most customer facing now can share of our own stories. Hey, this is how we use it. This is how it works. And it's like getting advice. If you were trying to get advice on parenting, you would talk to people who had kids, probably multiple kids, and farther along in life than you were. And the same thing happens with technology. We want to be farther along than our customers so that we can really be that technology consultant for them. The last sort of story or analogy that I'll share with you is about football. I'm sorry for those of y'all who are not sports fans or football. I know not everybody is, but something that I love, and so I share these analogies from time to time. And in football, you've got an end zone on each side, and the field is 100 yards long. So one of the things I'll say is, you don't get any points for going 99 yards. You get to the 1 yard line. That's great and all. You can be that close. But there's that magical little white line, and until you cross the ball, into that end zone, you don't get any points. And so, unfortunately speaking, that's how life is. And so one of our pledges is be productive. So while we look at a lot of different things, activity doesn't always create productivity. One of the ways that we measure productivity, another pledge is focus on profit. Ultimately, we have to be profitable as a company. Our customers have to be profitable at what they do, and so it doesn't matter always about the activity. Now, the activity is necessary, but ultimately, that end result is what's really important. We have to be productive. Now, in order for us to be productive, we have to take personal ownership. We kind of talked about, own it as one of our core values. And so that's each individual employee that grabs the bull by the horn. And another pledge, make it happen. We have to make it happen for our customers and for the company. Now, I don't know if any of you guys remember Tim Tebow. You probably heard of him. And back, I guess it was probably 2007, 2008, there's a famous speech. They lost to Ole Miss, and Tim Tebow came in the news, media conference after the game. And he said, "You will never see anyone work harder at winning than we will." And that's a great example of what it looked like for somebody to take personal ownership. And then ultimately, he didn't just take the ownership; he made it happen because they won the national championship that year. So that's a great example there. I'll leave you guys with this. The final pledge that I'll share with you is the pledge, lead by example. Because it's very easy for you to watch this video and think, oh, Billy Bob over there, he really needs to listen to this section. Sally Sue over there, she needs to listen to that section and take away what other people need to do. But the problem is, there's only one person that each of us can control, and that's yourself. So don't leave anything that you hear today thinking about what someone else can do. Think about what you can do. I love what Gandhi said. Be the change that you want to see. So when you see a problem in the company, when you see something that's not, working quite the way that you think, you see an area of improvement, of course, bring those up to others, but drive on it. Be the person who takes the bull by the horn, that makes it happen, and lead by example. So we're welcome. Love to welcome you to the IT Voice team. We're super glad to have you. Remember in all of this that we're not perfect in terms of who we are as a company, but these are the goals. These are our pledges in terms of what we want to be about. And hopefully this video is helpful to you to help learn a little bit about us and how we operate. So good to have you on board.